Hi, I'm Len Epp, co-founder of Leanpub, and in this episode of the Leanpub podcast, I'll be interviewing Ediz Najim. Based in Istanbul, Ediz is a software architect and technical leader with nearly 2 decades of experience designing and building distributed systems, microservices, and production-grade backend platforms. His work focuses on event-driven architecture, reliability, performance, and the practical engineering of AI-enabled software systems. Ediz is the author of the Leanpub book Systems Thinking for Agentic AI, a software architect's guide to building reliable LLM and agent systems. In the book, Ediz shows software engineers and architects how to design reliable AI applications with prompts, RAG, tools, memory, orchestration, guardrails, evaluation, observability, and runtime control. The book explains how to move from simple chatbot experiments to reliable AI-enabled software systems, reliable being a key word there. It focuses on the production realities that matter after the demo works, another key thing: latency, cost, failure handling, tool execution, structured outputs, testing, tracing, safety controls, and maintainability. In this interview, we're going to talk about Ediz's background and career, his book, and at the end, we'll talk a little bit about his approach to writing and being an author. So thank you very much, Ediz, for being on the Leanpub podcast.
First of all, thanks for having me. I'm glad to meet you again in
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, thanks. We did a launch video previously. Let me just pop up the cover of the book here. Okay, so here's the book we're going to be talking about in a bit. But first, I would like to ask you about yourself. I always like to start these podcast interviews by asking people for their origin story. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about yourself and where you grew up and how you built your career and how you first became interested in, computers and technology.
Sure. I was born in Baghdad. I lived with a big family. They encouraged me, support me to do my best. To be honest, I was a very good student where I loved to learn, searching, and reading books. When I finished my university, or after finishing my university, I moved to Istanbul and start my professional career in Istanbul in big company. My first project was very challenge for me because it was written in Java and in C framework. At that time, I didn't have good information or knowledge to manage this project, but I worked a lot of, and it is normal to work at middle night or wake up earlier and see the project and the classes. And after 2 months, my IT manager told me that you must be responsible of the mobile web too. That let me be confident myself and let me feel good because a big company give me more responsibilities. It's mean I did very well, and I started to search more, read more, writing articles at that time in 2008. And after that, I decided to work in startup projects because I believe the startup projects will teach me a lot of new information, a lot of new technologies. For that, I started work with small companies and I get the freedom of choosing the technology and the frameworks.
Right.
For that, it was very good for me to work with these small companies. And my dream was in one day I will work as a software architect that let me be really working all the time without stopping to achieve my dream. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that great answer. One question I was looking forward to asking you about was studying at university in Iraq. I went to university in Canada and in the United Kingdom, and I've interviewed authors from all around the world. So we learned about Germany and Spain and Italy and China. But you're the first guest I think we've had where I get to ask you, what's the university system like in Iraq? Is it 4-year degrees? Is it 3-year degrees for undergrad? What's it like?
Yes, we have a good education system in Iraq. The education system is not different from another countries. And if you search about the good universities in Iraq, you will find a lot of searcher or thinker work there. For that,
Right.
I am thankful to study in Baghdad and get my degree from Baghdad. Yes, but the university is different from working.
Yeah.
For that, the university give us the basics, but in the end of the day, we must develop ourselves. We must search. We must learn a lot of things from our mistakes, especially when we are working in software field.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great answer because it leads me to my next question, which I often ask authors with a background like yours, which is, if you were starting out now to have a career as a software architect, would you go to university?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because the academic information is really important. Important to get this knowledge from academic people who will teach you how to search, how to be clever. I believe that all the people are clever, but most of them don't use their brain. I'm sorry about that, but if a human use the brain in good manner, he can achieve everything. But we need this academic knowledge and this academic information. We still need universities, but I have one point about the universities. Uh, we must not give only the basics information. We must let the students to attend labs, attend many, how can I say that, real world um, software, to building real world software.
Yeah, I've heard lots of different answers to that question. I very much agree with the answer that you gave myself. One thing, the way some university programs work in Canada is that when someone's studying software engineering, they have to do what's called co-op terms. So they have to go work for a company 3 or 4 times during their degree. And we have I think 3 or 4 co-op students at Leanpub right now, and it's just amazing seeing them learn and day to day from the real world experience, and then go back to their classes with that experience. And it's a very good model. Um, uh, my next
But let me explain something here, please, Len.
yeah.
Yeah, we have this system, but it is not enough. I want to explain
Sure.
that to you. Not enough to go 1 month or 2 months to a company and work with the employees. We must make the practical like academic information.
Mm,
Yes, that is what I want to say. It is not enough to go 1 or 2 months to the companies. It must be more.
okay. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so moving on to talk about your book, which I have up here on the video for the second time in the history of the Leanpub video sort of things. I just learned how to do this. Um, uh, the book is very good, and it's very thorough and systematic. And although we've talked about it already on a launch video, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the origin story of the book. When did you start writing the book? Did it start as blog posts, things like that?
Sure, sure. Uh, as I mentioned, I like to write everything or write the notes in drafts. And I like to post in LinkedIn or another platforms. This led me to calculate these drafts and put them together. And in the end of the day, I see that I can write a book. The idea of this book was not about agentic AI. It
Mm.
was about Java framework many years ago. But we are busy to living and achieve some goals in our life. This time is the right time to write this book, to put my experience in software architecture with my work on agentic AI together and give the developers, software engineers, and tech leads one book. One book contains all they need to build reliable, traceable, and secret agentic AI system. For that, my book is not speaking about the basics or uh, dive to the details. No, I'm speaking about the infrastructure, about the architecture, and how we can apply systems thinking on agentic AI. For that, if you don't have any information about AI, you can read my book. If you are professional in AI, you can read my book too.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
it's and I love the idea of systems thinking and the sort of like emphasizing the thinking part. And there's a sort of theoretical foundation to your book as well. So my first question about that is, uh, what do you mean when you say an LLM is not an AI system?
Yes, many of teams have misunderstanding about that because they still think LLM is the agentic AI. But in real world, in fact, in software world, LLM is only one component in agentic AI. You remember when I give you an example, LLM is like our brain. Our brain can reason, think, make decisions, but in the end of the day, we need to use our hands or our eyes or whatever to achieve what we want to do. Exactly, LLM can think, can decide, can um do something, but in the end of the day, LLM need another surrounding component to do what we want from it as a system, not only as LLM or only like AI.
And
Yes.
so, yes, so when you're talking about building a system, you're talking about essentially building metaphorically building a body that has interacting parts. Some parts can do this, some other parts can do that, and you get to decide when you're building the system what to build.
Exactly. You cannot make the LLM the endpoint of permission or authorization. We must validate the input that come from the user. We must give the LLM the tools. We must give the specific information about the user question. And in the end of the process, we must validate the output of LLM because LLM can give us fluent answers but wrong answers. For that, we must have rules to apply them over the LLM results and see if we have the right evidences to say yes, the result is okay for the end user. For that, all the surrounding component with LLM will create or will be agentic AI system. Only LLM will be only AI or only one component.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the reasons I love your, brain body kind of metaphor is I have this joke that we achieved artificial general intelligence when they started hallucinating and making mistakes, because that's exactly what we do all the time. Um, and
Yes.
but so it's very interesting though, this idea of taking something that's non-deterministic, very powerful, and then building a system around it so it can be used in various ways, but very crucially reliably. And you use that word reliable and reliability in the description of your book that I gave earlier. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you mean when you talk in the book about reliability. What does that really mean when you're building a system?
As you mentioned, the LLM can answer us with wrong information. That will lead us to wrong results. And it is not matter when you ask the LLM to generate a paragraph or to edit an article. But it is very important when you ask LLM to make payment
Yeah.
or accept payment or maybe control the bank account.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, uh, for that, if you say uh, don't accept the payment of our $1,000, this is only the instruction, but you will not enforce LLM to apply this rule. For that, we need the reliable component to validate the input and the output, and we need the pipeline to record every step that will let us uh, trace the system and observe the system. Can you imagine that and one day a customer call you and say $1 million paid from our system? You must find
Yeah.
where is this money, and why we made this mistake. For that, reliability is very important. We are not working here in a deterministic system. Deterministic system mean 1 plus 1 equal 2. If else,
Yeah.
but now we are working with a human, let me say, or I'm used to say that LLM is like a child.
Mm-hmm.
We need to speak with him phrase by phrase, step by step, and the prompts must be clear. When you ask, I'm father for two sons,
Oh.
Alp and Amin, and one daughter, Alina.
Oh.
For that, I know very well when I'm speaking with my children, I try to give them the instructions one by one. This what we must do with LLM. Otherwise, yes, we will get unreliable, unreliable system, and we will live with many troubles.
Yeah, I
Yes.
really love that idea. I mean, particularly, comparing it to children, but not comparing it, like saying it is actually like that. And particularly, setting things out step by step is really important. And I think something that I will, say I'm guilty of not doing myself when I work with, Claude or something like that. And as soon as you run into trouble, you realize you have no idea what's going on between the input and the output unless you then like have some concept of the steps that are being carried out in between. And so you kind of can't, it's basically just kind of guessing and hoping until you actually have worked out a system step by step and understand how what's happening at each stage along the way. So uh let's say you've built a system around an agentic AI system around an LLM. How do you evaluate whether it's working well?
Yes, this is one of the biggest problems that we must solve it in agentic AI world. I explained this in my book, and I showed how important the evaluation. If you don't or anyone cannot evaluate the system, then he will not know if the system is well or bad. For that, evaluation is very important in all softwares. Here in Agentic AI, because we have component non-deterministic. This non-deterministic component can generate anything. Maybe you will say hello and say you can't drink coffee. What is the relation between hello and you can't drink coffee? You must evaluate the results, you evaluate the inputs too. Evaluation is very important, as I mentioned, and we don't need another framework or another tools to make this evaluation. All we need is that we must know the input. We must validate the input according to some rules, and we must know what is the evidence that can get us say the result is okay or not.
Right. So you have to set out the evidence for the evaluation and think about that. It's very interesting. One thing you reminded me of was, I think, an author I was doing a launch video with recently, who was kind of saying, like, look, when it comes to evaluation in the old way of doing things, when it was deterministic for 80 years of computing, you built a system, you evaluated it by running it, and then you walked away. You're like, it works. But that's not how evaluation works with agentic AI.
Yes, it is different. When we come to the evaluation is different in agentic AI because, as I told you, 1 plus 1 is equal to, it is the rule. We can make unit tests for testing the system and everything will be okay. But now we have a component that produce anything, maybe good, maybe bad, maybe related, maybe unrelated. Yes.
So I'm going to quote you and ask you a question, which is sometimes an unfair thing to do as an interviewer, but we'll see. So you have this very good line in your book that really distilled things well, and you say in your discussion of agents, an agent is a system that uses a model inside a controlled loop to pursue a task through actions, observations, and state until a stopping condition is reached. Now, my question to you is about the controlled loop part. How is the loop controlled?
Yes. In the last few years, we always read loop engineering. Loop engineering is meant to make a loop that control everything before the result. The same idea here, when we write agentic AI, we need a loop and we must be aware about some things. I will mention them. The loop will take the input of the user and make validation and make some steps, and after that we'll ask LLM to process this input. LLM may need to execute a tool. The LLM will ask the loop control to execute this method and return back the result. And this loop will continue until the LLM will say the final result is this. I said we must be aware about some items. One of them, this loop must not be an infinity loop. We must have a condition to stop this loop. Maybe we will say try only 10 times. 10 times you will go to LLM and LLM can ask you, or we can say you will consume 1,000 tokens only. For that, yes, loop engineering is very important.
I see.
Here in agentic AI world, is very important to make loop control, to control the input and the result, and be the layer between the user and LLM.
That's a very, very clear answer. It would really help me understand it better now. My next question is, and I'm going to be quoting you back at yourself again. Why does an application need, and here I'm quoting you, an explicit registry that defines which tools exist, what each tool is for, what input schema it accepts, and which execution handler or backend operation it maps to? So you don't need to obviously remember all those specific things, but what is the need for this explicit registry of tools?
Really, for these tools, we need MCP, model controller protocol, to keep all these tools or methods with signature to say this tool can accept this parameters and return this type of value. And if we put all these tools in one place, MCP, we will focus on another parts. But the part to connect with external world, like
Right.
I want to get the weather conditions in Istanbul or in London, then I will not, as LLM, I will not be worried about the web service or about the URL. Only I will say I need the weather in Istanbul, and it is enough. MCP will go to execute a URL, maybe get this information from database, maybe use Redis or another technology to
Right.
get this information.
My last question about the book is a hard one. Um, I think it would be for me. What do you think the role of an enterprise software architect is going to look like in 5 years? Will it be the same as it is now? Will it be very different?
Yes. Nowadays, we start speaking about agentic AI, about agents, about AI generally, GPT, Cloud, Gemini, and another tools. And every day, I can say in every day, we see a new version. For that, I think the software world will be changed. The AI will be used everywhere, but we need to be aware about AI. We must not give everything to this AI to do it, because the maturity of the AI is not that good now. But
Right.
5 years from now, maybe we will see a component, or we will see a system that let us say, yes, I can trust the AI, and may change all the software world.
That's a really great answer.
Yes.
And that leads me to the next part of the interview, where we talk about your work as a writer, and you've talked a little bit about this already. But one question I always like to ask people, because writing a book is a big project. How did you approach it? Did you, or in writing generally, whether it's LinkedIn posts, et cetera, do you set aside time like 2 to 3, do you put a thing in your calendar and say from 2 to 3 o'clock, tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to be writing? Do you go to cafes? Do you like to write on the train? How do you have a study where you tell your kids you can't come in if I'm in there and the door is closed? How do you do that?
Yeah, yes. The people who know me will answer this question easily, because I'm working all the time.
Okay.
Yes, I'm working all the time. I don't have a schedule to finish my time and to finish my work. I'm sorry, to finish my work and take a rest. In every day, my goal is to write one or two articles about agentic AI or
Okay.
about AI generally. That let me let me be creative in writing articles or finding another things. Maybe you see or you saw my sky architecture model, a model that I'm trying to build it to be the standard for building agentic AI,
Okay. No, I
because
didn't. Yeah.
I didn't find standards or principles to write agentic AI. For that, if you can visit the stycore.com to get all the information uh, about style architecture model and about stable principles that I'm working over them. Yes,
So this is
shortly,
just so people know, it's staai.com. Is that correct?
STAI
Okay.
core.com
Okay. Okay.
or core.com.
Okay. Sorry, please go
Yes.
on. I just wanted to make sure people could find it.
Yes, STAI core.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Uh,
What a great project. Uh, and so the last question I always like to ask people if they've written a book on Leanpub or they're using Leanpub to publish their book is if there was one magical feature we could build for you that you could ask us to build for you, or if there's one thing you totally hate about Leanpub and you think is terrible that you could ask us to fix for you, can you think of anything that you would ask us to do?
I couldn't understand you. Where do you mean?
Um,
Because the
so
internet that's the
Oh, okay. So my last question for the guest is usually it's about just about Leanpub, and it's if there was
yes.
one feature we could build for you, anything you could ask us to do. Can you think of
Yeah.
anything you would ask us to do?
Really, your platform is very good and very nice, and you yeah, take care about the authors. You meet the authors, ask them, and really, it is very good for us to make this podcast or interview. One thing, maybe the paper print books. Um, this will be great for us to say we have paper print book in Leanpub
Yeah,
platform.
thank you very much for that. We've had that request from many authors over the years. The world of paper things and the world of bits on screens is a very different kind of business. And so we don't do print books, but what we do is we try to make it as easy as possible for people. So if you write a book in a Leanpub writing mode, we have a print ready PDF that you can get. We do some settings and you do one click, and then you can take that and you can go to Amazon KDP or Ingram Spark or other things and you can do it. You can also pay us if you want to pay us a lot of money. We can go and manage all of that for you on Amazon KDP. But the main thing is we try and make it easy. Click a button, I get the PDF I need, and then you can go to a print on demand service and you can get print. But yes, thank you. That's basically the hardest thing you could ask us to do, and many other authors have asked us to do it.
From you. I wait the service from you then. For that, I don't need to go to another platform
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
or website.
So just before we go, is there anyone you would like to thank who maybe helped in the process of writing the book or in developing your career and things like that?
This is very good question. Really, I want to thank my mother and my father who encouraged me and made what I am now. Because without them, believe me, I will not be here. I will not be sit down and speak face to face to you. For that, thank you. Thanks, mom. Thanks, dad, for everything.
Well, Ediz, thank you so much for doing a video with me again. This time we did a full podcast instead of just a launch video. It's just great, always great to talk to you and to hear your thoughts. And thank you for using Leanpub to publish your great book. It's Systems Thinking for Agentic AI, a software architect's guide to building reliable LLM and agent systems. So thank you so much for being on the Leanpub podcast.
Thank you very much for your time. I'm glad to meet you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.